Captain Jake Morrison stood in front of the mirror in his small quarters aboard the diplomatic station. His dress uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable after months of wearing combat gear. The silver medals on his chest caught the artificial light. As he adjusted his collar for the third time, he hated formal events, but orders were orders. The Galactic Federation had invited him to Kepler, prime station, for some ceremony about human contributions to the war. Jake thought it was all unnecessary. He had just done his job like any good soldier would. The fact that he saved 3 colony worlds from the void creatures was simply what needed to be done at the time. He walked through the curved corridors of the station toward the main dining hall. The architecture was clearly alien with its flowing, organic shapes and soft glowing panels. Other beings moved past him in the hallways. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others had fur and walked on 4 legs. A few looked almost human, except for their strange colored eyes or extra arms. Jake had gotten used to seeing different alien species during the war, but this was different. These were diplomats and politicians, not soldiers. They wore fancy clothes and spoke in polite voices. It felt strange after years of battlefield communication. The dining hall was massive, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Long tables were arranged in a circle around a central speaking area. Jake found his assigned seat between a large creature with tentacles and a being that looked like a walking tree dot. As he sat down, a voice spoke beside him. "You must be the famous Captain Morrison." Jake turned to see a woman with pointed ears and silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her eyes were bright green, and she wore a flowing dress that looked like it was made from moonlight. She was clearly an elf, based on the briefings he had received about different species. "Just Jake is fine," he said simply. She smiled, and her whole face lit up. "I am Lady Aria Moonwhisper of the Silverleaf Court. I have read about your actions during the Battle of Titan 7. Quite impressive for someone so young." Jake felt his cheeks warm slightly. "I was just following orders and protecting civilians. Nothing special about it." Aria laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes. "Nothing special," he says. "You held off an entire void swarm with just your squad for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. The tactical reports called it impossible." Before Jake could respond, another being approached their table. This one was reptilian with scales that shifted from green to blue as she moved. She stood nearly 7 feet tall and had a military bearing that Jake recognized immediately. "Captain Morrison, I am Commander Zareth of the Saurian Defense Corps," she said in a voice that sounded like gravel. "Your reputation precedes you even among my people." Jake stood and offered his hand, which seemed to surprise the alien commander. She looked at it for a moment before grasping it with her clawed hand. Her grip was firm, and her scales felt surprisingly warm. "Commander," Jake said with a nod, "I heard the Saurian forces took heavy losses in the Outer Rim battles. Your people fought with great courage." Zareth's scales shifted to a lighter blue color. "Few humans acknowledge our sacrifices. Most see only our appearance and assume we are like the void creatures." The dinner began with speeches from various ambassadors and military leaders. Jake tried to pay attention, but found his mind wandering. The food was strange, but not unpleasant. Some dishes tasted familiar, while others were completely alien to. His human palate. Aria kept up a steady stream of conversation throughout the meal. She asked questions about Earth and human culture with genuine curiosity. Jake found himself relaxing despite the formal setting. She had a way of making even serious topics seem light and interesting. "Tell me, Jake," Aria said as they shared what appeared to be some kind of purple fruit, "do all human warriors remain unmarried, or is that just your personal choice?" Jake nearly choked on his drink. The question caught him completely off guard. Well, the military keeps me pretty busy. Never really had time for relationships or settling down." Arya nodded thoughtfully. That seems like a waste. From what I understand, human pair bonding is quite strong. Surely someone with your accomplishments would have many potential partners interested. It is not that simple, Jake said, feeling more uncomfortable by the moment. War changes people, makes it hard to connect with others who have not experienced the same things. Zareth, who had been listening, quietly spoke up. Among my people, warriors are highly valued as mates. Combat experience is seen as proof of genetic fitness and survival instincts. How fascinating, Arya said, her eyes sparkling with interest. And what about elven customs, Jake asks. Jake had not asked anything, but he did not want to be rude, so he nodded along. Well, Arya continued, reaching for what appeared to be a bottle of bright blue liquid. Elven courtship is quite different from what I understand of human customs. We value intellectual compatibility and shared interests over physical attraction, though that certainly does not hurt. She poured the blue liquid into her glass and took a sip. Her cheeks immediately became more flushed, and her speech became slightly more animated. This Centaurian wine is stronger than I expected, she said with a laugh. But as I was saying, Jake, you seem to have all the qualities that would make an excellent partner. You are brave and protective and clearly intelligent, given your tactical successes. Jake felt even more uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I appreciate the compliment, Lady Arya, but I really do not think about such things much. Arya waved her hand dismissively and took another sip of the blue wine. Well, then marry me human. At least I know you can protect me from anything in the galaxy. The words hung in the air for a moment. Jake stared at her with his mouth slightly open, unsure if he had heard correctly. Around their table, several other beings had stopped their own conversations and were now looking in their direction. Jake let out a nervous laugh. That is very flattering, but I think the wine might be affecting your judgment. Arya giggled and covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my, I suppose that did sound rather forward, did it not? I was merely making conversation about human customs. But Jake noticed that several beings were now pointing small recording devices in their direction. A journalist from one of the galactic news networks was speaking rapidly into a communication device while looking directly at their table. Jake had a sinking feeling that Arya's casual comment was about to become much more complicated than either of them had intended. Jake woke up to the sound of his communication device buzzing like an angry insect. He rolled over in his narrow bunk and squinted at the screen. 17 missed messages from Admiral Kate Sullivan flashed in red letters. The time stamp showed it was barely 6 in the morning station time. He sat up and rubbed his eyes before activating the device. Admiral Sullivan's stern face appeared on the small screen immediately. Morrison, what in the hell did you do last night? She said without any greeting. Good morning to you too, Admiral, Jake said, still trying to wake up fully. I attended the diplomatic dinner as ordered. Nothing unusual happened. Admiral Sullivan's expression grew even more serious. Nothing unusual, he says. Jake, you are currently trending on 17 different worlds. The video has been viewed over 40 million times in the last 8 hours. Jake felt his stomach drop. What video? The one where the elven diplomat proposes marriage to you in front of half the galactic media, Admiral Sullivan said. Check your news feeds, Morrison. This is a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Jake quickly switched to the Galactic News Network. His own face stared back at him from the screen next to a picture of Arya. The headline read, Elven Noble Proposes to Human War Hero, in bright flashing letters. He watched in horror as the video played, showing Arya's comment about marrying him. The recording made it look much more serious than it had seemed at the time. The way the camera angle was positioned made it appear as though Jake was considering her offer rather than just sitting there in shock. This is insane, Jake muttered. She was just making conversation. She had been drinking that Centaurian wine. That may be true, but various alien cultures are interpreting this very differently. Admiral Sullivan said, I have already received calls from 6 different ambassadors. The Saurian delegation thinks this might be a political alliance between Earth and the Elven courts. The Crystalline Consortium is asking about trade negotiations. Even some of our own people are calling this either a diplomatic breakthrough or a betrayal of human purity. Jake felt a headache building behind his eyes. What do you want me to do, Admiral? For now, stay put and avoid making any public statements. I am sending a diplomatic team to help sort this mess out. Try not to make things worse, Morrison. The screen went dark, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He quickly showered and dressed in his regular uniform before heading to the stations. Main corridor. As soon as he stepped outside his quarters, he realized his life had changed dramatically overnight. Beings of various species stopped and stared at him as he walked past. Some pointed and whispered to their companions. Others held up recording devices to capture his image. A few actually approached him, asking for comments about his relationship with Lady Aria. Jake kept his head down and walked quickly toward the dining area, hoping to get some breakfast in peace. Instead, he found a crowd of journalists waiting for him. They surrounded him, immediately shouting questions in a dozen different languages. Captain Morrison, is it true you are considering marriage to Lady Moonwhisper? What does this mean for human-elven relations? Are you planning to leave the military? How long have you been in love with her? Jake pushed through the crowd without answering and made it to a small cafe in a quieter section of the station. He ordered coffee and tried to think about what to do next. You look like someone who could use a friend, came a familiar voice. Jake looked up to see Commander Zareth standing beside his table. Her scales were a neutral brown color, which he had learned meant she was trying to appear non-threatening. Commander, Jake said with relief, please sit down. I could definitely use some friendly company. Zareth settled into the chair across from him. I have been monitoring the galactic networks this morning. Your situation has become quite complicated. That is an understatement, Jake said, taking a long sip of his coffee. I never asked for any of this attention. In my experience, attention rarely asks permission before arriving, Zareth said. The question is what you plan to do about it. Before Jake could answer, Lady Aria appeared at their table, looking flustered and embarrassed. Her silver hair was not as perfectly arranged as it had been the night before, and her green eyes showed signs of worry. Jake, I am so terribly sorry, she said, sitting down without invitation. I had no idea my foolish comment would cause such chaos. My father has been sending me angry messages all morning. Your father? Jake asked. High Chancellor Eldarin Moonwhisper of the Silverleaf Court, Aria said. He is not pleased that his daughter appears to be making marriage proposals to alien species without consulting the proper authorities. Zaroth's scales shifted to a slightly amused yellow color. I take it Elven diplomatic protocol is quite formal, extremely formal, Aria confirmed. Marriage between different species requires approval from the High Council and involves trade agreements and political considerations. My casual comment has apparently been interpreted as an official proposal. Jake rubbed his temples where the headache was getting worse. So what does that mean exactly? It means that until this is officially resolved, I am essentially engaged. To you in the eyes of galactic society, Aria said. Several elven nobles have already sent messages asking about the wedding date. This keeps getting better and better, Jake muttered. Commander Zareth leaned forward. There is more you both should know. 3 different alien nobles approached me this morning, asking about making their own marriage proposals to Captain Morrison. Apparently, his reputation as a warrior makes him a very desirable mate across multiple species. Jake stared at her in disbelief. Are you serious? Completely serious. Lord Vexan of the Crystal Imperium offered a substantial dowry. Princess Kala of the Feathered World suggested a political union. Even General Frack of the Iron Clans expressed interest, though I suspect his motives are more about accessing human military tactics. Arya looked genuinely distressed. "Oh, Jake, this is all my fault. I never meant for any of this to happen." "It is not your fault," Jake said firmly. "You were just making conversation. Neither of us could have predicted this reaction." "But what are we going to do?" Arya asked. "The media attention is only going to get worse. I heard they are planning to set up a permanent broadcast station outside the diplomatic quarters." Zareth's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue color. "Perhaps you should consider spending time together officially, if you are going to be linked. In the public mind, anyway, you might as well get to know each other properly." Jake looked at Arya, who was biting her lower lip nervously. Despite the chaos surrounding them, he had to admit she seemed genuinely kind and intelligent. The previous evening he had enjoyed their conversation more than he expected. "What do you think, Lady Arya?" Jake asked. "Would you be willing to attend some cultural sessions together? At least until we figure out how to resolve this situation." Arya's face brightened considerably. "I would like that very much, Jake. Perhaps we can learn something about each other's species while we wait for the diplomats to sort everything out." "It is settled then," Zareth said, standing up. "I will make the arrangements. But I suggest you both prepare for more media attention. This story is not going away anytime soon." As if summoned by her words, a group of journalists appeared in the cafe doorway. Jake sighed deeply, knowing his quiet military life was officially over. The cultural sensitivity sessions took place in a quiet room away from the main corridors of the station. Jake arrived early and found Arya already there, reading from a small crystalline device. She looked up when he entered and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Jake," she said. "I brought some elven poetry collections if you are interested in learning about our literature." Jake sat down across from her at the small table. "I have to admit, I have never been much of a poetry person. Military training does not leave much time for artistic appreciation." "That is exactly why you should try it," Arya said, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Poetry is about finding beauty and meaning in experiences. Surely someone who has seen as much as you have could appreciate that." She activated the crystalline device, and words appeared in the air between them, written in flowing script that seemed to dance and shift colors. "This is called the Song of the Starlight Warrior," Arya said. "It was written 300 years ago about an elven soldier who fought against the Shadow Plague." Jake listened as she read the poem aloud. Her voice had a musical quality that made even the translated words sound beautiful. The poem spoke of courage in darkness and finding hope when all seemed lost. Despite himself, Jake found it moving. "That was actually quite good," he admitted. "It reminds me of some of the things I felt during the worst battles of the war." Arya leaned forward with interest. "Tell me about it, Jake. What was it like fighting the void creatures?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain experiences that most beings could not understand. The void creatures were not like normal enemies. They did not just want to kill you. They wanted to erase you completely. Make it as if you never existed at all. "That sounds terrifying," Arya said softly. "It was," Jake agreed. "But that made it easier in some ways. When you are fighting for the very existence of everything you care about, there is no room for doubt or hesitation. You just do what needs to be done." Over the following days, they met regularly for their cultural sessions. Jake taught Arya about human military traditions and the bonds that formed between soldiers and combat. She shared elven philosophy and their deep connection to nature and the cycles of life. Jake discovered that Arya was not just a diplomat, but also a xenobiologist who had published research papers on human physiology and psychology. She had been studying his species since first contact and found their emotional resilience fascinating. Humans have this remarkable ability to keep going even when logic says they should give up, she explained during one of their sessions. Most species either become paralyzed by fear or give up when faced with overwhelming odds. But humans seem to get stronger. Maybe we are just too stubborn to know when we are beaten, Jake said with a laugh. No, it is more than that, Arya insisted. I have read the battle reports from Titan 7. You held your position, not because you thought you could win, but because giving up would mean the civilians behind you would die. That kind of selfless determination is rare in the galaxy. Their conversations were interrupted one afternoon by Commander Zareth, arriving with urgent news. Her scales were bright red, which Jake had learned meant she was agitated about something. We have a problem, she announced without preamble. High Chancellor Moonwhisper is coming to the station. His ship will arrive tomorrow morning. Arya went pale. Father is coming here personally. That is not good news. Why? Jake asked, though. He suspected he already knew the answer. Because it means the Elven High Council is taking this situation very seriously, Arya explained. Father only travels off-world for matters of extreme importance to Elven society. Zareth's scales shifted to a worried orange color. There is more. Our intelligence sources indicate that several extremist groups are also planning to arrive at the station. Some want to protest interspecies relationships, while others see this as an opportunity to cause diplomatic problems. Jake felt his military instincts kicking in. What kind of security do we have? Standard diplomatic protection, Zareth replied. But if there are organized protests or worse, we may not be adequately prepared. That evening Jake and Arya attended a formal dinner with various ambassadors and their staff. The atmosphere was tense, as news of the High Chancellor's arrival had spread throughout the station. Jake noticed several beings watching them closely and whispering among themselves. They were halfway through the meal and the lights suddenly went out. Emergency lighting activated, casting strange shadows throughout the dining hall. Jake's combat training took over immediately. Everyone stay calm, he called out in a voice that carried authority. Move away from the windows and stay low. Arya grabbed his arm. Jake, what is happening? I do not know yet, but we need to get you somewhere safe. Explosions echoed through the station's hall. Jake could hear the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing somewhere in the distance. This was not a protest or diplomatic incident. This was an attack. Jake pulled Arya toward the emergency exits while scanning for threats. Around them other beings were panicking and running in different directions. He spotted Commander Zareth near the main entrance, coordinating with station security. Zareth, Jake called out. What is the situation? Unknown attackers have breached the outer docking ring, she replied, her scales now deep red with combat. Stress. They appear to be targeting the diplomatic quarters. Jake's mind raced through tactical possibilities. The station's layout was not ideal for defense, but there were several choke points that could be held if necessary. We need to get the diplomats to the secure areas, Jake said. Can your security teams handle the corridors leading to the central core? We will try, Zareth said, but our forces are not equipped for this level of assault. Jake looked around the dining hall at the various ambassadors and their staff. These were not soldiers. They were politicians and academics who had no experience with combat situations. Arya, I need you to help coordinate the evacuation, Jake said. Use your diplomatic status to keep everyone calm and moving in the right direction. What are you going to do? She asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. What I do best, Jake replied grimly. Buy you time to get everyone to safety. Jake quickly assessed the available weapons and defensive positions. The dining hall had several entrances that would need to be covered. He organized the few security personnel present and began setting up a perimeter. The first attackers appeared at the main entrance, wearing combat armor and carrying advanced energy weapons. Jake recognized their equipment as military-grade, not the tools of simple protesters or extremists. The battle was intense but brief. Jake's experience and tactical knowledge made the difference despite being outnumbered. He used the station's architecture to his advantage, creating crossfires and eliminating the attackers systematically. When the immediate threat was neutralized, Jake found Arya helping injured beings in the secure area. Her dress was torn and dirty, but her eyes showed determination rather than fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, checking her for injuries. "I am fine," she replied. But Jake, those were not random attackers. They knew exactly where to find the diplomatic staff. Someone planned this specifically. Jake nodded grimly. "Which means this is not over yet. Someone wants to make sure our relationship causes maximum diplomatic damage." Commander Zareth approached them with a concerned expression. The attackers had identification from 3 different extremist organizations, but their equipment and training suggests professional military backing. Jake felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. Someone was using their situation to destabilize relations between species. The fake marriage proposal had become the center of a much larger and more dangerous game. Jake sat in the security briefing room staring at intelligence reports spread across the table. 3 days had passed since the attack, and the investigation was revealing disturbing patterns. Commander Zareth sat across from him while Arya paced nervously by the window. "The attackers came from 6 different worlds," Zareth explained, pointing to a star map. "But their weapons all came from the same black market supplier. Someone with significant resources coordinated this operation." Jake studied the tactical data. The timing was too perfect. They knew exactly when the High Chancellor would arrive, and when security would be focused on diplomatic protocol rather than threats. "There is something else," Arya said, turning from the window. "I received a message from one of my contacts in the Elven courts. Several other species have been asking questions about human military capabilities, specifically about you, Jake." "What kind of questions?" Jake asked, though he suspected he would not like the answer. "Technical questions about human battle tactics and psychological warfare methods," Arya replied. "The kind of information that would be valuable to potential enemies of the Federation." The door opened and High Chancellor Eldrin Moonwhisper entered the room. Jake had expected someone intimidating, but Arya's father was surprisingly ordinary, looking for an elf. He was tall and dignified, with silver hair, similar to his daughter's, but his manner was more formal and distant. "Captain Morrison," the High Chancellor said with a slight nod. "I understand you protected my daughter during the recent attack." "I did what any soldier would do, sir," Jake replied, standing and offering a respectful bow. "Perhaps," the High Chancellor said, "but I have reviewed the security recordings. Your tactical response was impressive for someone unfamiliar with this station's layout. It suggests the reports of your abilities were not exaggerated." Arya moved to stand beside her father. "Jake saved dozens of lives, including mine. Does that not prove that humans can be valuable allies?" High Chancellor Moonwhisper studied Jake carefully. "The question is not whether humans are capable warriors. The question is whether they can be trusted with the responsibilities that come with such capabilities." Jake met the older elf's gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I have spent my entire adult life serving something larger than myself. I have never used my training for personal gain or to harm innocent beings. Yet your very presence here has caused significant political disruption," the High Chancellor pointed out. 3 species have threatened to reconsider their federation membership if humans are granted full diplomatic status. Commander Zareth's scales shifted to an annoyed yellow color. "Those same species opposed Saurian membership until we proved our worth in battle. Some beings will always fear change. The difference, the High Chancellor said, is that Saurians do not inspire the same level of fascination and fear that humans do. Captain Morrison has become a symbol of human potential across the galaxy. That makes him either a valuable asset or a dangerous threat depending on one's perspective. Jake was beginning to understand the larger implications of his situation. You think someone is trying to use me to cause problems between species? I think someone is trying to determine whether humans represent an opportunity or a threat to the current galactic order, the High Chancellor replied. The attack was designed to test your capabilities while creating maximum political disruption. Arya looked between her father and Jake with growing concern. What does that mean for us? It means, the High Chancellor said, that your relationship has become a test case for human integration into galactic society. If it succeeds, it will open doors for your species. If it fails, it could set back human diplomatic progress by decades. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. I never wanted any of this political attention. I just wanted to serve my duty and maybe find some peace when the war ended. Unfortunately, Captain Morrison peace is rarely granted to those who excel at war, the High Chancellor said. Your reputation makes you valuable to friends and dangerous to enemies, whether you wish it or not. Over the following days, Jake found himself spending more time with Arya as they navigated the complex political landscape their relationship had created. He discovered that beneath her diplomatic training and scholarly interests was a person of genuine warmth and courage. During one of their walks through the station's observation deck, Arya stopped to watch a group of young beings from various species playing together in a small park area. Do you ever think about what the galaxy might look like if all species could interact as easily as children do? She asked. Jake watched a human child playing with an elven child and a young Saurian. I think that is what we are all fighting for in different ways. A future where species does not matter as much as character. Is that why you became a soldier? Arya asked. Jake considered the question carefully. I became a soldier because someone had to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. The fact that those innocent people happened to be human was just circumstance. If elven children were in danger, I would protect them just as fiercely. Arya turned to face him with an expression he could not quite read. I believe you would, Jake. That is why I think my joke that night was not entirely a joke. What do you mean? Jake asked, though his heart was already beating faster. I mean that spending time with you these past weeks has shown me that you are exactly the kind of person I could imagine building a life with, Arya said. You are brave without being reckless, strong without being cruel, and you care about others more than you care about yourself. Jake stared at her in surprise. Arya, I do not know what to say. This whole situation started as a misunderstanding. Did it, though? She asked, stepping closer to him. Or did it start because two people found something in each other that they had been looking for without knowing it? Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Commander Zarath's voice came over the communication system requesting all diplomatic personnel report to secure areas immediately. Jake's combat instincts activated instantly. Another attack? No, came a familiar voice behind them. Admiral. Sullivan approached with a grim expression. Something worse. We have just received intelligence that the previous attack was a diversion. The real target was gathering information about Federation security protocols. Information for what purpose? Arya asked. Admiral Sullivan looked directly at Jake. Someone is planning a much larger Operation Morrison, and all evidence suggests they want you alive for it. Jake felt cold certainty wash over him. They want to use me against the Federation. That is our assessment, Admiral Sullivan confirmed, which means everyone around you is now a potential target, including Lady Moonwhisper. Jake looked at Arya, seeing fear in her green eyes for the first time. since he had known her. He realized in that moment that what had started as political theater had become something much more personal and dangerous. "What do we do?" Arya asked quietly. Jake took her hand and squeezed it gently. "We stop running from this situation and start fighting back. But together this time." 6 months later, Jake stood in the beautiful gardens of New Geneva. Station-watching crews set up decorations for what the galactic media had dubbed the wedding of the century. White flowers from a dozen different worlds created archways, while crystalline chimes from the ethereal realms provided gentle music that seemed to come from the air itself. The investigation into the attacks had revealed a conspiracy involving extremist groups from multiple species who feared human influence in the galaxy. The plot had been stopped, but not before it proved something important to the Galactic Federation Council. Humans and their allies could work together effectively against common threats. Nervous, Commander Zareth asked, approaching him in her formal dress uniform. Her scales had been polished to a brilliant blue-green that sparkled in the artificial sunlight. Terrified, Jake admitted. Fighting void creatures was easier than this. Zareth's scales shifted to an amused yellow color. That is because void creatures do not require you to make lifetime commitments. Jake looked around at the gathering crowd. Representatives from 47 worlds had come to witness the ceremony. What had started as a joke had become a symbol of cooperation between species. "Do you think we are doing the right thing?" Jake asked. "All this attention feels overwhelming." "I think," Zareth said carefully, "that you and Arya have found something rare in the galaxy. Two beings who complement each other perfectly. The political implications are secondary to that." Admiral Sullivan approached, wearing her dress uniform with all her medals and ribbons displayed. "Morrison, you clean up well when you try." "Thank you, Admiral," Jake said. "Any last-minute security concerns?" "Nothing we cannot handle," she replied. "Though I suspect your fighting days are far from over." "The Federation Council has been asking about your availability for special diplomatic missions." Jake nodded. He had expected something like that. His relationship with Arya had opened doors for human diplomacy, but it had also created new responsibilities. The ceremony began as beings from across the galaxy took their seats. Jake walked to the altar area where an ancient elven priest waited, alongside a human chaplain and a Saurian ritual leader. The combination of traditions would make this the first truly interspecies wedding in Federation history. Arya appeared at the far end of the garden wearing a dress that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Her silver hair was adorned with tiny flowers that glowed softly in the dim light. Jake felt his breath catch as she walked toward him, accompanied by her father. "Hi." Chancellor Moonwhisper had changed his opinion of humans considerably after seeing how Jake and Arya worked together during the crisis. He now saw their union as an opportunity rather than a political disaster. "Take care of my daughter, Captain Morrison," he said as he placed Arya's hand in Jake's. "She is more precious than all the stars in the Elven territories." "I will, sir," Jake replied. "With my life if necessary." The ceremony combined elements from all three cultures, creating something entirely new. Jake spoke vows he had written himself, promising to stand beside Arya through whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. Arya spoke of finding in Jake a partner who shared her dreams of a united galactic community. When the priest pronounced them, married, the crowd erupted in celebration. Beings from dozens of species cheered and applauded while colorful lights danced in the air above them. During the reception, Jake and Arya were approached by countless diplomats and officials, offering congratulations and discussing future cooperation between their peoples. Jake began to understand that their marriage was indeed the beginning of a new chapter in interspecies relations. "Husband," Arya said during a quiet moment between conversations, "how does it feel to be officially married?" "To an alien. Like the best decision I ever made. Jake replied, pulling her close. "Though I have to admit, when you made that joke 6 months ago, I never imagined it would lead to this." "I had been hoping for an excuse to talk to you all evening," Arya confessed. "I had read about your military service and found you fascinating. The wine just gave me the courage to be forward about it." Jake laughed. So it was not entirely a joke after all. "Not entirely, no," Arya said with a smile that made her whole face light up. "I may have been hoping you would take me seriously." They were interrupted by Commander Zareth, who approached with a concerned expression despite the festive atmosphere. "I apologize for disturbing you," she said, "but there is something you both should know. The Federation Council has approved the new interspecies cultural exchange program that Arya proposed. They want her to head the project." Arya's eyes widened with excitement. "They approved it. That is wonderful news." "There is more," Zareth continued. "They have also created a new position for Jake, Special Advisor for Interspecies Military Cooperation. Apparently several worlds want to learn about human tactical innovations." Jake felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It sounds like our honeymoon is going to be the last quiet time we have for a while." "Actually, about that," Arya said with a mischievous smile, "I may have forgotten to mention something. I have been selected to establish the first permanent research station on Kepler-7. It is a beautiful world with no intelligent life and perfect conditions for studying interspecies biology." "Are you saying our honeymoon is going to be setting up a research station?" Jake asked. "I am saying our honeymoon is going to be building something new together," Arya replied. "Just the two of us on a pristine world with nothing but time to explore and discover things about each other." Jake grinned. "That sounds perfect, actually. After everything we have been through, some peace and quiet is exactly what we need." The celebration continued late into the station's night cycle. Jake and Arya danced to music from a dozen different worlds while their guests shared stories and formed new friendships across species lines. As the evening wound down, Jake found himself standing on the observation deck, looking out at the stars with his new wife beside him. The view reminded him of all the worlds he had helped protect during the war and all the possibilities that lay ahead. "Do you think we will be happy?" Arya asked, leaning against his shoulder. "I think we are going to build something amazing together." Jake replied, "Whether that makes us happy or not will depend on how much chaos the galaxy decides to throw at us." Arya laughed. "Given how our relationship started, I think we can handle whatever comes next." Jake wrapped his arms around her and watched a transport ship disappear into hyperspace, carrying some of their wedding guests back to their homeworlds. In a few days, he and Arya would depart for Kepler-7 to begin their new life together. "There is one more thing," Arya said softly. "Something I wanted to tell you privately." "What is it?" Jake asked. Arya turned to face him with an expression of joy and nervous excitement. "The medical scans I had done before the wedding revealed something unexpected. It seems our species are more compatible than anyone realized." Jake stared at her as understanding dawned. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that in about 7 months, the galaxy is going to see its first human-elven hybrid child," Arya said. "Our son or daughter is going to be truly unique." Jake felt overwhelmed by a rush of emotions he had never experienced before. Joy and terror and wonder all mixed together in a way that left him speechless. "Our child," he finally managed to say. "Our child," Arya confirmed. "The beginning of something entirely new in galactic history." Jake pulled her close and held her tight while stars wheeled overhead and their future stretched out before them, full of infinite possibilities. What had started as a joke had become the foundation for a new kind of family and perhaps a new kind of galaxy, where the boundaries between species mattered less than the bonds between individuals. The last thing Jake thought before they headed back inside was that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected beginnings.